Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Four Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserlo.
Four Tire Change podcast, ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Dawson Iserlo with you here, and we've made it. The championship is arrived. Honestly, it's kind of flown by here, these playoffs at least, and we now have a chance to crown a new NASCAR champion, potentially for the last time under this format. We'll see. We still don't have an announcement from NASCAR about what that's going to look like next season and beyond, which is rather unique, given that these things are usually planned out well in advance. But we do know that the champion is going to be crowned at Phoenix on Sunday afternoon, and it's going to be one of four drivers. That's Chase Briscoe, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, or William Byron. It will either be a or a JGR car or a Hendrick Racing car. We know now that Penske will not continue their run of dominance in the championship. They had a chance, as we go back to Martinsville quickly. Look, I thought Martinsville was, it was a better Martinsville race than some that we've seen. We know the short track package is still not necessarily where it needs to be, and it doesn't lead to the most exhilarating finishes or anything like that. But, Ryan Blaney looked like he was going to win this race for a long time. And, I was texting some friends like, man, Blaney's going to pull it off. The Penske magic will just continue. Whenever they need to have it done, they have it done. But credit to William Byron, he had the better car, and he makes a move, he gets by him. Then there's another restart, right? Because you get a spinner, and so you're thinking to yourself, or at least I'm thinking to myself, like, that could create some weirdness, right? And you're going to have, some like a medium range run of like 10, 15 laps here to decide this thing. Maybe Blaney's got enough short run speed to figure that out, and ultimately he did not. And Byron drives away from him and ends up winning this race to book his ticket into the championship to make sure that he gets to be a part of this thing, and now that's kind of the result we get. So, look, as far as the format's concerned, as I've said before, I definitely think there's going to be changes. I think that's pretty obvious. Whether they go season-long points or at least, and I heard what Kevin Harvick said on his podcast this week on the Happy Hour. Like, there's got to be more of an emphasis on sample size. I think that's pretty clear. I think racing fans have kind of made that obvious, that they don't want these, at times, what can feel fluky results to be determining who's the champion of the sport. And we got an example of it. In the Xfinity Series, Connor Zilisch was a dominant driver all year long. 10 races won. I mean, he was unbelievable. It's a bad day on Saturday, and he's not going to win the championship. Like, it's as simple as that. And he could lose it to some of these drivers that he's outdriven for 30 of the 34 weeks, or, whatever number you want to come up with. And that is probably not the best way to be deciding who the champion of the sport is, right? We want to talk about the seriousness of it all. And it's not even the same as in team sports where you have a tournament format like the World Series is going on right now. Well, the teams are on equal footing, at least once you get to the postseason. They've done something to earn that right, and then they play it out one by one. There's not an instance where a team can kind of randomly win one race and move to the next round of the playoffs and win one game, like for the instance in the World Series, right? It's a best-of-7 series in the ALCS and the NLCS. They had to win 4 times. So if you want to call it fluky, maybe you can, but they had to do something fluky 4 different times. That's different than in the NASCAR Cup Series right now, where you win one race in a round of 8, and now you're in the championship regardless of what happens in the other rounds. So anyway, besides the point, we've talked enough about that on this podcast already, but we will see what the format looks like. I wanted to talk a little bit about each one of these championship drivers. We're heading to Phoenix. Phoenix is weird. You always think that a guy like Chase Briscoe is going to have a good chance there. I don't feel great about Denny Hamlin's chances at Phoenix, but yet, for me, his chances to win this championship seem like it's riding on destiny, right? Is it just Denny's year because he's the best driver potentially in the history of the sport without a championship, and he's got another shot to get there? He's getting up there in age. We don't know how many more chances he's going to have. So that's the point there. But what would it do for each of their careers, right? Let's start with Briscoe. I mean, for Briscoe, for him, it would kind of continue that path of being a blossoming star in the sport. He was dominant in the Xfinity Series. He got a chance with Stewart-Haas. It maybe wasn't the best situation. He still found a way to win some races here and there, be competitive, gets a chance in JGR this year, and year one finds himself in the championship 4, winning multiple races again. A win for Briscoe really kind of continues to solidify that he's one of the guys that's going to be around for a long time in the series. So it'd be important for him for a multitude of reasons. We'll go to Denny next. I mean, it would mean everything. That one's maybe the most. It would mean the most to Denny, I think, because We know it, and at times he's probably deserving of winning a championship or two already. I go back to that 2020 season where he and Harvick are battling it out all year, and then neither one of them wins a championship. That stuff happens. It's unfortunate. But for him, it would cement a legacy. And I think, whether he wants to admit it or not, I think it'd be a huge burden off of him. I think it would allow him to kind of get some closure in his career. And I'm not saying this is it for him, because I do think he's going to continue to drive for the next handful of seasons. But we know what his plans are going to look like after, he's done driving, and that's running a race team and doing whatever else Denny wants to do off the track. So it would be massive for Denny Hamlin. For Kyle Larson, it would be another step in the evolution of him as a driver. And we know there's been times where he's been talked about as potentially the best driver in the world because of all the different disciplines that he competes in, trying to do the double, things of that nature. He's got a championship. He's got a bunch of wins. He's got that magical season where he kind of was dominant. But now, he kind of seemingly fell off a little bit for a while. And now he's back in the mix again. And I think that's important for him. So for Larson, this is kind of another step in, he's already further established than Briscoe or Byron are, but it'd be another step for him in kind of staking a claim to being the best driver in the world, or at least the best stock car driver in the world. And lastly, for William Byron, pretty similar to Chase Briscoe, although Byron's actually been knocking on the door a little longer than Briscoe has, cementing yourself as one of those premier drivers in this sport. And I think Byron's kind of already there. He's made multiple Championship 4 appearances. He's consistently won races. He's won the Daytona 500. Like, he's done a lot. But at the same time, when you drive the number 24 car for Hendrick Motorsports, you are expected to be one of the faces of the sport. And I think this would be another kind of cementing element of that for Byron, where he has, there's no real denying who he is and what he's capable of if he puts it together for a championship run. So that being said, as far as who I actually think has a really, really good chance, as I mentioned, I don't love Denny's ability and Denny's chances at Phoenix. We know that he has not won a championship for despite multiple chances. Larson has. Byron has not. Larson is the only driver of the 4 with a championship. So that is an interesting aspect of this. You could have there's a very good chance you're going to have a first-time champion come out of it. I guess in some ways Larson is the favorite. He's probably got the least pressure on himself because he does have a championship. He's done it before. It's not to say none of these drivers have had success at Phoenix. I mentioned that. I would feel like Chase Briscoe would have a really good opportunity because of his history there. But Larson, I think, has to be the favorite just because of the lack of pressure. We will see pretty soon here. You head out for practice, and we'll get a chance to see what these cars and drivers look like out there. Typically, the Championship 4 are going to qualify near the front. You always talk about that element of all right, if a team has one driver in the championship, you figure they're going to put all their emphasis on him, and they'll give him a better chance to win. Well, we got 2 teams with 2 cars each, so Hendrick and Gibbs are both going to have to split up their setups and split up their resources, any parts and pieces they've got left laying on the shelves that they want to use for a championship situation like this. So that also maybe adds a little bit of an element of intrigue. And one more thing to point out here before we close it out. Keep in mind the winner of this race doesn't necessarily win the championship. We could have a non-championship 4 driver win the thing. We saw that with Ross Chastain, right? And that has happened not just once in the history of this format. So I wonder, too, if these drivers are constantly going after each other, does someone else kind of spoil the party and win the race despite the championship being won in 2nd, 3rd, or 4th place? That is something to keep in mind. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But hey, we've made it 36 long weeks, and this is week 36 of 36. It's not the last episode of the season for 4-Tire Change, of course. We will be back to recap it, talk about the offseason, things of that nature in the coming weeks. But for now, it is the last race preview of the season. I will officially pick Kyle Larson. Why not? As I said, I think he's got the least to lose and the most comfortability in these types of situations. But for now, signing off here is Dawson Iserloh, the 4-Tire Change Podcast. Championship Sunday has arrived. We'll see who holds the trophy up at Phoenix.